What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Points Per podcast. My name's Eric. I'm excited to have both of my co-hosts here with me today, both Will and Vishy. And we're going to be diving into the coaching carousel today. We've had a lot of activity this past week or two, a lot of new hirings, firings, new head coaches, new offensive coordinators. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today, specifically these play callers for these offenses. So whether you're here for your specific team, for a real life NFL look at the expectations and implications of these play callers, or if you're here to hear about the fantasy perspective, to figure out what it's going to mean for these rosters and these individual players, we're here to talk about all of that. We're on a little bit of a time crunch because we're trying to get this in before the Broncos-Patriots playoff game. And I do think it's probably important to note that we are recording this on Sunday, January 25th, in case news breaks in the coming hours or days after we release this video. We'll be covering that as we go, but we're working with the information that we have right now. So I say we just kick it off. Will, I'll throw to you first. Who's the first coach that you want to talk about?
So the first one I want to talk about is the most recent one. We're looking at Mike McCarthy for the Steelers. Kind of a surprise in Mike Tomlin stepping down the way that he did, and also a surprise in them bringing in Mike McCarthy. I think this is kind of the last name that people probably had on their list. People probably thought a little bit more life was going to get injected into Pittsburgh, but it seems like they kind of did the opposite of that. A little bit more of, I guess, the same. I don't really know what to feel about this hire, to be honest with you. What do you guys think about this one?
Vijay, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I think Eric, I think you might have this in your notes, but I do want to see who the OC is that the Steelers end up going with. I think that'll dictate and shape a lot of what their offense looks like, and then of course that'll have an impact on the fantasy players in the offense, whoever they may be. I think we'll see some personnel changes there too. But I think, holistically, it is certainly a safer hire. I think like Mike McCarthy can hit the ground running, and this is. It's literally the polar opposite of hiring like a younger guy. Is it Scheelhaas? Is that how you pronounce his name?
Scheelhaas, I think.
Scheelhaas. I think that'd be more exciting, but I would expect maybe a longer ramp up time with a younger, fresher head coach like that. So I think Mike McCarthy is a safe pick, one that could maybe keep the Steelers in their mediocrity or decent kind of playoff contention year over year. But I agree. It's a little unexpected. It's not a game-changing hire that you might have expected them to go with after Mike Tomlin stepped down. I do agree. I think it's somewhat of a little more of the same of what they had with Tomlin.
Vishy predicting another wild card weekend loss next year. I see.
Yes, sir.
No, I do kind of want to reserve judgment until we see the staff that he brings in with him and the offensive coordinator that he brings in, like Vishy said. I'm hopeful that it could be a guy like Nate Scheelhaas or Grant Udinski or something like that. And so maybe it's more so they don't have a quarterback in place, and so they don't feel like it's a great idea to bring in a new play caller, somebody without the experience, new to head coaching. Scheelhaas, I think, has only been offensive coordinator in college, and he's the passing game coordinator over there in LA. So to bring somebody in without a quarterback plan in place and something like that, I could see that being a lot of pressure for a first-time head coach. And so maybe they bring them in as the play caller, kind of with a succession plan down the line to promote them. But I can't really predict any of that. In terms of what Mike McCarthy brings to the Steelers, specifically with him, we've seen his kind of West Coast passing concepts background with the Cowboys. He turned it into what he coined like the Texas Coast offense with Dak and with the help of Kellen Moore, kind of making a more balanced but hybrid system there. He did have 1 year as the play caller in 2023 where they were the number one offense in the league, and then immediately followed that up with a 20th scoring offense in the league the following year. So kind of up to you to decide how much of that was Kellen Moore and how much of that was Mike McCarthy. I really need to see what the coaching staff looks like around him before I can make harsh judgments.
Sure.
Absolutely.
So let's move on to the next coach here. Vishy, I'll throw to you. Who do you want to talk about next?
Let's go, I think, maybe write down your list with the next hire, Kevin Stefanski, who's now the head coach of the Falcons. Eric and I chatted, I think it was a few weeks ago, about Stefanski, and Eric was putting out a good argument. I think he was citing a Ringer article that kind of was highlighting Stefanski's in history and the potential he could bring. And I think we can agree, like, he gets a bad rep, and maybe rightfully so, maybe not, due to his time on the Browns because of, unfortunately, what the organization the Browns are. But it's important to keep in mind the success he has had with them still. I mean, he's taken this team to a couple playoff appearances at the very least. He had that excellent year with Baker in his first year, regardless of what Baker might say nowadays about Stefanski and how these players talk about him. Like he's had decent success, and he's shown to be a savvy head coach that can work with somewhat dysfunctional personnel groups and put out the decent fantasy seasons in some ways. I'm actually kind of excited for him to come to where I'm living in Atlanta. I think that he has like a set offensive core. I think this does nothing but good things for Bijan, and I'm sure you can kind of get into maybe some of the specifics about how his scheme might benefit Bijan. But I think as a coach, he's a gritty one, and he's coming to a place where they need an experienced, savvy coach, maybe one working with teams with uncertainty at quarterback and to elevate them. And I think he has the potential to do so for sure. Again, regardless of the rap he's gotten or the record he's had with the Browns over the last couple of years.
Yeah,
what do you think, Will?
Thoughts?
Me personally, I think this is a semi stinky kind of hire right here. I'm not a big fan of this one personally because I don't feel like a lot of the problems for Kevin Stefanski have really disappeared with him going over here to Atlanta. Like, I get the weapons are there, everything that you would look for in terms of everything he wants to set up as an offense. He likes to establish the run, likes to get those wide, zones going. Bijan, great at that. He likes to get the play action going. You got Drake London. You possibly have Kyle Pitts coming back, depending on what that situation looks like. But you got all the pieces, but then the guy who's at the helm of all of it, you're looking at either Kirk Cousins or, Michael Penix to really captain the ship. So it's like you left one place where you had a real quarterback situation going on. Whatever reasoning you want to give that situation, you can come to your own conclusions over there. But you've gone to another one where you got a guy who's not a well-equipped that you want to be your quarterback of the future, who is not going to be very well equipped to run this offense, or you're looking at Kirk Cousins to kind of bridge things a little bit more until you can get somebody who can competently run this offense the way you want. So while I am kind of, optimistic for the future, I just don't know when that future is with this team right now.
Yeah, I can see it from both perspectives there. And to kind of dive more into what you were talking about, Will, with Penix specifically not being a good fit. Stefanski wants to run a wide zone run scheme complemented by the play action game. Typically, the play action game is more effective under center. And we've seen that Penix, both in college and in the small sample in the NFL, is terrible at that. His EPA per pass is significantly worse on play action attempts. And it craters when it comes to his under center attempts. I think he's only taken 10 under center snaps in the last 2 years because the coaching staff knows that he's not really capable of doing it. And so for that to be like what we've seen the bread and butter from Stefanski be, I am nervous as to what this offense is going to look like. It is possible that they roll with Kirk to start the season or something like that, but I can't imagine they wouldn't at least give Penix another shot this year. Maybe like a last shot, probably, by my estimation. But to get to some of the positives, I do think this is a good thing for Bijan. It's not going to be anything new in terms of scheme. He's used to that wide zone run scheme. I believe that made up almost like 60% of the Falcons' rushing attempts the past 2 seasons. So I think he'll fit in quite well. Will, you mentioned Kyle Pitts. If he sticks around, his receiving efficiency jumped through the roof when it came to play action attempts. I think he went from like 1.41 yards per route run to 2.55 on play action. So that would be huge for him. Drake London has kind of been pretty even across the board in terms of efficiency, whether it be traditional drop back or play action. So that's kind of my takeaways from the specific players. But anything else you guys want to add from that?
No, I think that's a good analysis. I think I've also thought a bit. I'm curious to hear y'all's takes on who out of the coaching carousel that was available, and maybe we can exclude like the outliers that people kind of agree are good. Like let's exclude Harbaugh, for example. Who do you think would have been, if any, a better fit for the Falcons, or who do you think could have elevated them? Because a lot of their problems are unfortunately with their players. Like, are there any other candidates that were on the market currently that you think might have been a better fit if the Falcons decided to kind of go with them or interview them longer and maybe opt for them?
I would have personally, I know he's kind of a one-hit wonder when it comes to, good years he has in the NFL, but I feel like Cliff Kingsbury might have been an interesting look, at least for the Falcons, in terms of like the way he runs his offense and just the way, the way he tries to funnel things through guys too. I feel like it would have been interesting with this group of guys out here. But how sustainable that would have been with Michael Penix, I feel like that's also the same problem there too. So
yeah. There's a little bit more propensity with him to stay in the shotgun, which I think would probably help Penix a little bit. I think, Mike McDaniel would have been a lot of fun. He's just shown he's done such a good job of like adapting to his personnel that like I would have believed in him wherever he went. So I think he would have worked well. I like Grant Udinski a lot. He's a guy that hasn't been hired yet. I think he's one of the primary candidates for the Browns right now. But he's another guy that I'm really excited for that I think would probably be pretty adaptable in that way and maybe make the best of Penix. There aren't that many names that I would have like preferred necessarily. It's just kind of a tough gig with the quarterback situation they have there.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a reason that a lot of teams would be happy and are vying for Mike McDaniel to be their next OC at the very least. But we know he can work wonders as a coordinator, even if his head coaching maybe wasn't as fruitful you would have wanted. But cool. Yeah. I mean, I agree with what y'all said. Should we bounce it back to you, Eric, to kind of bring up the third coaching hire?
We'll just stick with my bookmark list here on Twitter. Cool. We'll go to John Harbaugh with the Giants. And obviously he's not going to be calling plays, right? So this is also another one where we have to wait to see who his offensive coordinator is going to be. But I do think there is a reasonable amount to talk about with the effects that he might have on the team in general. I watched a athletic podcast with Robert Mays and Jordan Rodrigue. And I thought that they did a really good job of kind of breaking down what he might mean for the Giants organizationally. He's not going to provide a schematic advantage the way that some of these other coordinators and play callers will. But he's definitely a floor raiser. He's a guy that, made the Ravens the great organization, the very stable organization that they have been over the past 18 years. And something that the Giants desperately need. I think he's going to improve everything from, obviously the staff that he hires, the roster, I think, is probably going to improve. I think just, the little pieces, whether it be the analytics department or, anything within the organization, I think he's going to be a floor raiser, kind of a rising tide. And then the ceiling outcome is going to be determined by the coordinator that he brings in, which to this point has been speculated to be Todd Monken, which I think would be probably a good fit for the offense that they have right now. But what do you guys think?
The only thing I'm curious about, do you think it's going to be a situation where they're going to give the keys to John Harbaugh and just kind of let him, really trust him to run this team? Or do you think it's going to end up, because I feel like with the Giants, at least a little bit lately, there's been a little bit of dysfunction in terms of people that have been picked and then what the ownership have thought versus what the leadership for the team have thought.
Dude, Joe Shane is fighting tooth and nail to hang on to any power that he has left. And I really, really hope that they fire him. It sounds like they won't. I've been incredibly uninspired by his draft picks these last few years. Jackson Dart, obviously a hit, but whether or not that was what he wanted is kind of contradictory out in the media right now. But Vishy, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, to answer that first, I think Harbaugh had so much leverage during the hiring process that, even if I'm not saying they're going to give him, the keys to the org, or he's not GM, but I'm under the impression that a part of the negotiations and the part of the discourse they had bringing him in, because he was sought after by other orgs too, is that they would have him have a lot of control over many things. What those are exactly, we don't know. But first and foremost, I agree that the impact of the players that we get and how the team will shape up. We don't know what their offensive scheme will look like. Again, like y'all said, Harbaugh doesn't dictate that. The only certainty you can have with Harbaugh is that he's gonna build a great staff. That's just what he does with the connections he has, and through him and his brother. We don't know what their offense will look like. We don't know if it's gonna be high flying. But what we do know is that he's gonna bring like a sense of stability and consistency into the organization that can only benefit them in the long run. And so I think, all things considered, the Giants fans should be happy. And it seemed like they were celebrating this hire, which I think is right. And I do think that he will have influence over the picks that are drafted. I mean, I think we've seen reports already that he's going to have a lot of say in free agency and the players that are brought into the org, which sometimes is handled by kind of the GM or more of the front office. Unfortunately, it sounds like he's just trying to bring over a lot of the Ravens free agents, which I don't like. But it sounds like they're giving him some power. I expect to see the Giants organization on kind of like an upward trajectory, whatever that means in the short or long term.
So if we were to say hypothetically, because we're talking about him bringing in some Ravens free agents possibly, if we were to also bring like a Todd Monken over with him as well, would we be optimistic about this Giants team going forward too?
Absolutely. I would.
Yeah.
I think that would be a great fit for Jackson Dart's strengths. I think that would mean good things for Malik Neighbors, assuming health for him.
I like Ken Scatabo too when he comes back healthy.
Yeah. I think his offensive system fits Dart pretty well, and he's also had experience in college not that long ago, and so he can kind of bridge that gap a little bit. Not that Dart necessarily needs it. He showed that he had a really good rookie season, but being able to kind of give him that comfort of those two kind of differentiating schemes, or maybe finding a hybrid in between the two to maximize his strengths, I think would be really good for him. I guess that's how I feel on Monken specifically.
No, I think that's extremely fair. I agree.
I got nothing to add there.
All right, cool. Well, we'll throw to you. Who do you want to bring up next?
All right, next is going to not be a head coach, but we're talking about an offensive coordinator that I feel like is super exciting to see, and that's Mr. Mike McDaniel going to the Chargers.
Absolutely.
It almost felt like a dream hire, especially for Amari and Hampton owners out there, or anybody with Justin Herbert stocks out there as well. It's just somebody who can get a high-powered offense going, and he just gets to act in the offensive coordinator role. He doesn't have to worry about any of the extra stuff. I think we just really get to see Mike McDaniel locked in this year. So I'm really excited for what that means, and for what that means for Justin Herbert's legacy going forward too, because this could just skyrocket things this year in terms of just how high-powered this offense could really get moving. Because like we talked about earlier, he's really good at adapting with the pieces that he had, especially over in Miami, where to a certain point, as things in time went along, things got really, really, a lot more lackluster. But he was able to turn the season around somehow and still finish out the season pretty strongly somehow. But going over here and having Amarion Hampton and then having, why am I blanking on names for the receivers? Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnston, who was able to step up this year as well. Justin Herbert at the helm. It's just really exciting to see going forward. Oh, Rondé Gadsden, who popped on the scene as well. I can't even, my fault. Don't even mean to be disrespectful. But the weapons that are just there and available, it's just hard to not get excited outside of like freak accidents like this year the Chargers had injury-wise.
Yeah, and Vishy, I am going to throw to you before I get into the depth of it, but specifically to hit on that last note that you made, Will, if they do have kind of that issue where they have tons of injuries along the offensive line, again, because that was the main issue this year and kind of what drove their offense down, I think McDaniel is the perfect guy for that. Like, he had a terrible offensive line to deal with in Miami with Tua's limitations as a passer. Like, they kind of had to make the most of that quick dink and dunk, get the ball out type scheme. And so if they have to revert back to that, which I'm sure is not ideal, it's not what he wants, but if they have to, they can make the most of it. They can kind of keep the ship afloat. Whereas this year they really struggled when they had to get the ball out that quickly. So, Vishy, I'm curious your thoughts in general.
Yeah, it's hard not to be excited about this. I'm not going to add much more about the players. I think this, I don't know if they could be elevated too much more, but this generally does elevate the offense and all the fantasy assets that are present in it. I think we know that, and it's exciting. I want to discuss, I think, kind of why he's a really good holistic fit and what to expect for the future too. So first things first, I think it's actually an excellent hire for the Chargers org as a whole, given who their head coach is. I think Mike McDaniel has tendency sometimes to kind of push to the extreme. I mean, he loves these like speedy guys and he wants to be hyper creative with plays. And I think Jim Harbaugh is like, he's just kind of like a steady headed man. Like, he's kind of the opposite of that. And I think like that balance between them is going to be really healthy, both for coming up with game plans and play designs and just kind of running their offense as a whole. And the second note I want to make is, I think this is an excellent decision for Mike McDaniel personally, because I don't think he'll be there long. I think that I think he's suited to be a head coach. I think that we saw what happened in Miami, and if he tried, and I think he could have probably snuck into one of the head coaching positions that were available. But I think this is in his best interest because he can revert back to being an OC, probably have the 2 years of probably a really good offense in LA, or is what I would expect. And then start looking for head coaching jobs again after that 2 year stint. So I think for him, it makes a lot of sense because it lets them kind of reset and then test the market again in a couple of years after, I think, what'll be a couple good years of being an OC rather than kind of just jumping ship to being the head coach of a kind of a mediocre org that might not boost or keep his stock as high as a head coach, if that makes sense. I think it makes a lot of sense for the team and for him. And the Chargers offense is, assuming their O-line isn't just destroyed again, it's going to be pretty damn good next year.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. Will, I want to jump into some of the players for fantasy perspective. Anything you want to add before we start talking about that?
Just for the Chargers in general?
Yeah.
No, I just think it's absolutely wheels up for the if man. Justin Herbert is I think this is finally the year where it's if he doesn't get it done, we got to start looking at him a little different. But at the same time, I'm not saying Justin Herbert's been bad. I think he's been phenomenal with what he's had available to him, especially last year. So like you said, I just think this is an absolute elevation for everybody involved, especially Amarion Hampton, especially with as much as we saw him getting involved in the passing game last year when he was getting ramped up before that injury. I'm really excited to see what Mike McDaniel can do with that, with what Vishy said, a more balanced approach to the run game and to the passing game involving with the running back as well. Because if it's anything near what we saw with Devon Achane, but in the body of what Amarion Hampton has, it might be a little bit nuts.
Yeah. I'm definitely excited to see it. Outside of 2024, where the offensive line completely fell apart and they had so many injuries to their weapons, McDaniel has always produced an efficient run game. So I absolutely agree with the sentiments that you guys have both had, that Hampton's ceiling is definitely going to be higher. I do think it's interesting, though, because Hampton doesn't really match the typical McDaniel running back profile that we've seen from him. It's typically been slightly undersized, kind of speedy guys. Not that Hampton is slow. I think he ran a 4.46 in his 40, so he can definitely move, but just a different style of runner. And maybe more importantly, Hampton has been less efficient in zone scheme concepts versus gap scheme. And that's kind of McDaniel's bread and butter, is that wide zone Shanahan-esque running style. Not that I don't think that he can't cater to his running back strengths, but I am curious to see if that matters. And then when it comes to the pass catchers, I think that this is probably the perfect hire for Oronde Gadsden.
Yeah.
Not that he's necessarily going to be, on the field at all times. He might still be a 60% snap guy, but considering we've seen McDaniel get the most out of these non-blocker kind of wide receiver hybrid tight ends, whether it be Jonnu Smith, Darren Waller, Greg Dulcich, we've seen great fantasy outcomes from all of them in Miami. And so the fact that we're going to get that in maybe an even better offense with Gadsden there is pretty exciting. I don't know what to make of it for the wide receivers necessarily. I think we've said it's kind of a boost for everybody, but specifically, I don't know how to take it for McConkey versus QJ, if Keenan Allen's even there. Do you guys have any specific thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't, like you said, I kind of left them out a little bit on purpose because, like you said, I don't really know who it would be a boost for. I feel like it's a boost overall just for the group in terms of efficiency and just in terms of the play calls and the quality of touches they're going to get. But in terms of who's going to be the guy, I would imagine it would be Ladd McConkey, but I can't make any promises there at all, And especially, going into this draft season, who knows if they go out and get a guy this offseason as well.
True. Anything to add, Vish?
No, I agree. I think that's probably the part of the offense that does hold the most uncertainty given Mike McDaniel's history, which is why you're posing the question. Generally, I think their offense will be elevated, but it is hard to predict, which specific receiver might take advantage of that. It's hard to predict if Oronde Gadsden will continue kind of his nuclear breakout he had towards the latter half of this year, given how tight ends have generally looked in Miami. So I think, I think it's difficult to predict, unsure, but typically, as a whole, when your offense is elevated, those players end up at least holding around their ADP or performing above that as well. So they, at the very least, they're safer picks in the mid rounds, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just wheels up for Herbert, because it
Wheels
doesn't
up
matter.
for the F man.
Yeah, he's going to be great. I think McDaniel's going to raise his floor outcome in terms of like his fantasy production and definitely increase the frequency of spike weeks. So I'm really excited to see what the Chargers look like in 2026.
It's going to be fun.
All right. I forget what order we're in. Who's deciding who we bring up next?
I believe Bush is up next.
Boy.
Yeah.
Let's actually why don't you go ahead and scroll right down? Let's talk about Drew Petzing.
Let's do it.
So that he will now go from the Cardinals and now be the offensive coordinator.
Anybody see this?
For the Lions. And I appreciate, Drake Fantasy, Brian Drake's contribution to our podcast here, asking if Dan Campbell is calling plays about week 5. And I want to push back on that. So,
yeah,
I think out of all the coordinators available, I mean, we just talked about a really exciting one, Mike McDaniel. Drew Petzing is not that exciting. If we're talking about excitement in a whole, if we're talking about the creativity of play calling, the personnel that he likes to use, and the type of plays that he likes to run, I think he's a little more maybe mellow is the right word. Now, Eric, I'll let you handle kind of the deeper scheme discussion and the effects that can have on players. But what I said was he wasn't that as exciting, and I think that's actually a good thing for the Lions. I don't think they need crazy innovation or excitement. Their weapons are ridiculous. They have Jahmyr Gibbs. They have Goff, have proven to be fine, a quarterback at worst. And they have some really exciting weapons in the offense at the receiver and tight end position too. So I think they needed this. I think they just needed some stability, something a little simpler, someone that'll just sit and use the weapons they have and not need to get creative for having a lack of weapons. And I think it's a pretty good hire.
Yeah, I agree. Before I kind of dig into the minutia, like Vishy mentioned, Will, do you want to bring anything up specifically?
Yeah, I just want to congratulate Drew Petzing on getting away from Kyler Murray, and hopefully now his career is going to greatly prosper from it, because Kyler Murray is a terrorist when it comes to people's careers in the NFL. I'm going to say it. He's an absolute terrorist. He's absolutely nuking Marvin Harrison Jr.'s career. He is a cancer to that team. Jacoby Brissett looked much better than Kyler Murray has ever looked for that team last year. And Drew Petzing is going to be good for the Lions. Like you said, he's going to be exactly what they need him to be. He's going to have an actual competent quarterback that can run a play-action offense in a good way and actually make a read and a good throw instead of just not seeing over the line and scrambling outside every single play. But yeah. I'm excited to see him with this Lions team because, like you said, they have what he needs in terms of the weapons and stability. With J-Mo coming back on to the end of last season as well, I'm really excited to see what he can do with making him into more of a deep threat for the team and really developing him a little bit more too. And just, I think people really underrate how much stability at the quarterback position really can, make that difference. Because the Cardinals last year looked night and day between Jacoby Brissett and Kyler Murray. We were joking about it before when Kyler got hurt. We were like, Jacoby Brissett coming in to save the season. And then he actually did. So
save the season might be strong, but
he
I know
looked better. He looked better than Kyler Murray at the very least. And like the weapons around him prospered from that as well. Like Michael Wilson took a huge step up this year, and that was able to be done. I'm excited to see what he can do. And I'm glad he got away from Kyler Murray because I think Kyler Murray has dragged a lot of people's careers a little bit further down than they should be.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That was quite the rant. And now I'm also going to ramble. But yeah, I think that's a good transition. I think that Kyler was just a terrible fit for what Petzing wanted to do offensively, which is very similar to Kevin Stefanski's scheme, actually, where there's a lot of he's actually got more of kind of a hybrid run scheme. It's not necessarily all wide zone, but wants to establish the run and then piggyback off of that with the play action game, which was just not Kyler's strength. He couldn't go under center. Similar to kind of what we talk about with Penix, maybe not to the same degree, but he struggles in those same areas. Jared Goff is the perfect quarterback for this system. He thrives in that under center play action game. But to talk about Petzing specifically, like I do think he probably deserves a little bit of kind of negative, what am I trying to say? A little bit of criticism for not adapting his offense to what he had there personnel wise. But it would have been tough to kind of fit Kyler into that scheme that he wanted to employ, where he likes to establish the run, lean into heavy personnel groupings, use shot plays, play action pass, but to give him his flowers because people aren't viewing this hire as exciting. In 2024, the Cardinals ranked 2nd in yards per carry, 5th in EPA per rush, and 3rd fewest in runs stuffed. And so I think what this means for the run game is huge compared to what John Morton brought this past season. Like, I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to absolutely go off. And I think that the shot plays and explosiveness piggybacking off of that in this offense are going to be back in 2026 for sure. Obviously, James Conner and kind of the running backs that they had in Arizona don't necessarily fit the same body type that Jahmyr Gibbs had, but I don't think there's going to be any issue with Petzing and Dan Campbell kind of coming together to figure out how to best utilize Gibbs in this potentially revamped running system.
I absolutely agree. I think Petzing helped give James Conner some of the best years of his career late in his career. I'm excited to see what he could do with Jahmyr Gibbs. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then also, I think it's important to shout out, like, Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to continue to do what he does. Hopefully, J-Mo continues to get used in that explosive kind of shot play area with that play action pass. But Sam Laporta, I think, stands to benefit maybe the most of anybody from this hire. We saw, obviously, Trey McBride have one of the best tight end fantasy seasons ever last year. Basically matched Travis Kelce's best fantasy season, which seems to be flying under the radar a little bit, like giving him his flowers for how well he played. But I think if Laporta can come back healthy this year, we're going to see a lot more tight end usage in this offense than we've seen previously.
Yeah, I think it's important to note the kind of specific fantasy player impacts it could have. I agree. I actually think Laporta is elevated the most if you have to pick one player in the Lions offense. I actually think J-Mo is second. I mean, Amon-Ra has been one of the most consistent receivers in the NFL for like 3 or 4 years now. I don't think that changes. And then it's a good thing for Gibbs. I just can't say it elevates him because I don't think he can be.
Yeah, he's already in the stratosphere. Yeah.
Matter of fact, he's probably going to have less points per game this year because it's hard to match like 25, whatever he had. So I'm not saying it elevates him, but I would be shocked if non-injury reasons he's fallen out of the top 5 RBs. Like he's going to be excellent. It's not a slight at him. I think it just does elevate other players in that offense, which means he might not get 20 looks a game or something. That's fine.
That's
perfectly fine.
So I don't want to dwell too much longer. We've spent plenty of time, but you mentioned that you think that J-Mo might be second in the pecking order of who this hire benefits the most. Mm-hmm. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you, but just from what we've seen in the past with the Lions is that if Laporta is thriving production-wise and from a fantasy perspective, J-Mo is typically the one that's taking the brunt of the hit and being more inconsistent. Any reason why you think that he might not experience that, or like with as many mouths to feed as they have, like somebody's got to take, some sort of.
That's a good point. I don't think this was a slight necessarily at Amon-Ra or the other weapons. I think in terms of a relative benefit, I think one of the difficulties has been that J-Mo kind of burst onto the scene, but has kind of just been stagnant. And this maybe is less of a look at Petzing and more of a look at, hey, there is a new OC in the house that might look at J-Mo a little differently. I know you all said towards the end of last season, J-Mo did start popping off, but I think basically it's just a change of scenery without going anywhere for J-Mo. He has a new OC and one that could come in and just decide to use him probably closer to how much he should be used. But I do think Amon-Ra is obviously the wide receiver one on that team, and you bring up a good point that if Laporta starts being used more, you have to take that cut out of someone. Here's to hope. I wouldn't be surprised if it's J-Mo. I think many Gibbs owners would hope that it's not Jahmyr. But I think I think we'll have to wait and see. But again, I think this is a stable hire. I mean, he's not that exciting, but the Lions don't need exciting. They just have an excellent team. They just need someone to call the plays right.
Yeah. Will, anything to add there before we move on?
No, I got nothing.
All right. So I think I'm next here. We'll just keep on scrolling. We'll go to, I would say our, but Vishy's on the program today, so not our Washington Commanders.
Yeah.
For David Blough. This one's exciting. This one's definitely interesting. I believe he's 30 years old? Super young still, not too far removed from his playing career even. This is also only his second season as a football coach in any capacity at any level ever. So there's definitely a certain amount of risk that kind of is involved in that with a lack of experience. But I'm really curious to see kind of how. Also, is it Blough? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
That's how I've always heard it pronounced, David Blough.
Yeah. So I'm excited to see how he kind of combines the coaching concepts that he's been around. We saw him as a quarterback under Ben Johnson in Detroit. We saw him play, I think, for half a season under Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota. And then most recently, he's been on staff with Cliff Kingsbury. So far, the reports that I've seen from analysts that cover the Commanders specifically say that he's expected to lean more on the Ben Johnson, Kevin O'Connell stuff and a little bit less in the Kingsbury area, which obviously is very exciting. I don't know how much of the run game he's going to implement from like a Ben Johnson, who has probably maybe the most creative and best run scheme out there in the NFL right now, considering he was playing quarterback and not necessarily on the coaching staff when he was there with Ben Johnson. But yeah, I think it's going to mean good things for Jaden Daniels. I think he's got that familiarity with him already. I am curious to see what the team does in terms of limiting his running based on kind of his health issues that he's had. But yeah, overall, I'm excited. If we get the Ben Johnson, Kevin O'Connell stuff, super excited for what that means for the offense. I think there's a lot of things that are yet to be ironed out in terms of the personnel and the roster there and who's actually going to be in town to benefit from that. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think on that.
I think it was an interesting hire. When I first saw it, at first I thought it was a signing because, like you said, he's 30. But then I saw it was our OC, and I was like, oh. And then I saw he was actually a coach for us last year. He was like the passing game coordinator. He was one of the quarterback coaches. So he's actually pretty close with Jaden Daniels. So just seeing that we have an OC who has at least that kind of a relationship with our quarterback, I think it is good to see that they're on the good page like that and the same page. Now, what that's going to mean going forward in terms of like development, I'm not really sure. Because at the same time, this is David Blough. It's not like he was amazing in the NFL, but he was always, he was good enough to play in the NFL for a while, and obviously good enough to be a coach. But this was just a surprise hire for me. I thought that we would go for a bigger name possibly, but it seems like they're trying to kind of build up the organization a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know too much about him. I'm not going to speak too much about him or his like accolades or what the offense could look like under David Blough. But I think holistically, you guys have discussed that this was an internal hire, one that's being raised up. He's young, he's exciting, and the Washington is a team that has the luxury to do that because they're kind of going through tumultuous times, and now is the time as you rebuild, kind of build back the team. Why not give a chance to an internal guy, one that could grow with the org, and then maybe be your head coach once you kind of rise a little bit out of mediocrity into kind of being a contending team, hopefully soon. He could be the one that's there with the org during that and one that continues to lead them past that. And I think there's no reason not to. I think unfortunately it seems like Washington at this point in time might not have the weapons to be an immediate contender with an air raid. We know not Cliff, but I think it's exciting. I think now is the time to try some things while having some sense of consistency, and then he kind of fits the bill there. Good looking dude.
I think
handsome fella.
Handsome fella.
They can do wonders for an org, man. Just saying.
I think that like outside of that, or at least not outside, but just to build on that, I think that is a good thing too, is that it kind of answers the direction that the organization is headed in, that they're not trying to swing for the fences anymore. I think last year was that kind of, we're going to try to make all these vet signings and we're going to try to compete because they made it to the NFC Conference Championship the year prior. And yeah, that kind of flamed out quick. So I think, like you said, this kind of does show just more patience from the organization. And like you said, Eric, you kind of alluded to, I think it may be them being a little bit more patient, a little bit more safe with Jaden Daniels as well, being like, hey, you don't got to go out there and win it on every play. Just, take it one play at a time. Yeah,
the only, and even this is not guaranteed, but the only potentially kind of specific thing that I have on Blough, I felt like under Kingsbury, there was a lot of inconsistency. And I don't want to throw him under the bus too much because he certainly had success in his first season. But I felt like there was a lack of preparation for some opponents where we would just go into a game and have no chance. Like we just couldn't move the ball. And so I think a lack of preparation if David Blough is anything like Ben Johnson, is the last thing that Commanders fans are going to have to worry about. I think he's going to go into every game with the best game plan available to him. Whether the personnel that we have in Washington heading into 2026 can execute, we'll have to see. But I do feel a little bit better knowing his previous history about the level of preparation and readiness that we're going to have going into each week.
Absolutely.
All right. Back to you, Will. Are we just continuing to scroll down the list here?
Yeah, we might as well go on to Eric right here. Come on, man. This hire right here, man, this is the most let's see what's going to happen type thing. Because I guess people have been trying to just recapture that old Patrick Mahomes magic that just hasn't quite been there for the team. But the team has also gone through a lot of reconstruction since then. People have just gotten older. Like Travis Kelce's about to age out of the league pretty soon. So this, I guess, is their way of trying to revitalize his offense and get back to those days of old. I don't know if Eric Bieniemy is the answer, because we did see a year of Eric Bieniemy as an offensive coordinator, for another team outside of the Chiefs. But maybe it's that team between him and Andy Reid that's really going to get it done. I don't know. Personally, I'm not super optimistic. I think this was kind of a step in the wrong direction. I think this was them kind of... Hey,
we can't go in the wrong direction from Matt Nagy, right? I mean, come on.
Okay, this is, I guess we'll say, a step in a lateral direction, because I don't feel like this has innovated or changed anything for the team. I feel like they're trying to recapture lightning in a bottle, and this wasn't the way to do it.
Vishy, I feel a little bit differently. Do you have anything to add before I make some comments?
I don't feel actually too differently from Will. I was going to say something similar, which is, I think, we just talked about the Commanders saying, okay, maybe this is the time to kind of take a swing for the fences. And we're seeing a lot of teams that, we had a huge head coaching carousel this year. It's just, and that meets the definition of a lot of teams saying, like, we are also going to take big risks and see if the outcome, if the probable outcome of that risk is just a big jump in a positive direction. I agree that Bieniemy offers that compared to Matt Nagy, but I'm not surprised that Chiefs fans are a little upset, because it is a little bit of the same old. They know what they had with him. Now, I think a caveat I want to put in, which maybe you'll allude to more, this is kind of a unique scenario with OC, because we know the role that Andy Reid plays in an offense and in play calling, and just as kind of almost like a de facto offensive coordinator while being head coach. And so I think it means a little bit less, and maybe the relationship between him and his OC is what really matters more, which he knows with Eric Bieniemy. But I'll let you get the specifics now, maybe of what he's like as a coordinator and how that elevates specific personnel.
Yeah. So I want to fully acknowledge both of your guys' points and say that it's not the most exciting. We've seen Bieniemy go off on his own once with the Commanders as an offensive coordinator and have a very underwhelming season. But from a positive perspective, Eric Bieniemy has spent the vast majority of his coaching career as a running backs coach, and he's produced very good run games. And last time we saw him in Kansas City, they had a pretty damn good run game. And the thing that they've lacked without him and under Matt Nagy is a run game. And I think we can argue about what's the most important or what their biggest deficiency that's causing them the most issues, but their complete inability to move the ball on the ground at all, I think, is a huge part of that. Will, did you want to jump in on something?
Do we not think that having Isaiah Pacheco as the guy is the problem there?
I mean, yes.
That's a losing recipe in itself already.
And I hope that they address it. Right? I hope that heading into 2026, we're not rolling out Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco.
Yeah, and for 4 months, we're talking about, are the Chiefs good at running when they have Jeremiah Love running the ball with Bieniemy?
Yeah, bro.
Like, if we pick Jeremiah Love,
but if they pick Jeremiah Love, why did they need Eric Bieniemy? That's what I'm saying. Is like they got a guy who is a running back coach who's good at running the ball, and that's fucking awesome. But what does that mean when you have Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt as your RB1 and 2? And if you bring in a Jeremiah Love, a fucking generational prospect, and you're like, oh my God, Eric Bieniemy revitalized the run game. What does that mean at the end of the day?
All right. Let's address it, because
can I tell Siri to set a reminder? I got to tell Siri to set a reminder for 6 months from now and tell Will that Eric Bieniemy is a good.
Hallelujah. We can run the ball with Jeremiah Love. Oh my gosh.
But genuinely, let's address it, right? Like, okay, let's say that they don't take Jeremiah Love. Let's say they sign somebody in free agency, because I do think Pacheco and Hunt aren't the answer. Maybe Brashard Smith gets a little bit more involved in the offense. Maybe I don't have any specific names off the top of my head, but
Hey, Brees Hall, free agent coming.
Well, yeah,
up
but he's
soon.
also, I mean, he's another kind of top flight guy.
Yeah.
The point I was trying to make originally is that I think that he's going to be very positive for the run game. I'm also excited to see if he can inject anything new to this offense, considering he just worked with Ben Johnson and saw that offense. Vishy, you alluded to the fact that Andy Reid is the primary play caller here, so a lot of it's still going to ride on his shoulders and his ability to innovate into his old age. We've seen things get a little bit stale there over the past 2 seasons, so we need him specifically to kind of revamp that passing game. But if they can get something going on the ground and be a little bit more balanced and not have to fully rely on Mahomes' magic every single play, I think that will have a positive effect on the offense.
Yeah, I think those are good takes about Bieniemy. He definitely fills the hole in the Chiefs' offense. At the very least, it fills a need for them that they would have wanted to address a coordinator. I don't have too much more to say there. Why don't we keep moving down the list to who you have next? I believe it's going to be Zac Robinson now from the McVay tree, who is now the OC for the Bucs. I once again, I don't have too many thoughts about this. I really will defer to you on the specifics of how how the offense might look in terms of scheme and which players would be used more. What I do think is exciting, though, is I don't think we saw the the Bucs to their full potential last year. There's a lot of reasons for this. I think there were injuries kind of across the board, particularly a QB early on that people seem to kind of point fingers at every time something went wrong or the Bucs didn't perform. It was Baker couldn't hit the open side of a barn. I think a lot of this was happening. And I think the O-line had some injuries. And I don't know too much about Zac Robinson. I'm excited to hear your opinions on how he might elevate specific personnel groups. But I do think we could see a big bounce back from the Bucs offense and not from a player that's only named Emeka Egbuka. I think that kind of that offense as a whole could perform a little better, and maybe the team could benefit from having a more competent offense next year.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think, remind me, this Zac Robinson, I'm drawing a blank for some reason. He was the OC last year for Atlanta, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that him being here and having Baker at the helm and having the group of weapons there, because when it came to last season with Michael Penix under there, that's what kind of the question mark was. But with Kirk Cousins and the way that Kirk kind of runs an offense, and then having a Baker Mayfield who's sort of a younger, more athletic Kirk Cousins, in my opinion, I think that's sort of we get to see more of how that offense started to run towards the second half of the season, where things started to pick up. Kyle Pitts started to come on to the season as well. Now, Drake London did whatever he was doing. He had his boom or bust weeks. But in terms of how the offense was running and how Bijan was doing himself, things definitely opened up a lot more for him. But like I said, Eric, I'm sure you have more of the specifics on how that opened up. But in terms of for Bucky, I think this is overall a good thing for him and how he's going to be used in the offense.
Yeah, 100%. So similar to what we talked about with what Kevin Stefanski is walking into, what Zac Robinson is walking out of, I think will probably bode well for what Tampa is going to look like. He had to deal with Michael Penix and his inability to play under center and do play action stuff, which made the offense very, very predictable. That was the biggest thing that I noted from his tenure, was that defenses knew when they were running and when they were passing. And it's tough to get anything done consistently when that's the case, when you're that predictable. And that was because Penix he couldn't get under center. He had to run the ball from the pistol. He had to pass it out a shotgun. And so having Baker Mayfield, like Will, you mentioned, I think is going to be really big for him. Zac Robinson is coming from the McVay tree. So we're going to see kind of a hybrid, creative zone running concepts that I think are going to be good for Bucky and kind of the rest of that running back group in general. I am excited to see what it means for Bucky as a pass catcher, because we saw them kind of get away from that after he came back this year compared to what they really were ramping up to give him at the end of his rookie season, where he was dynamic out in space. And I think based on his usage of Bijan, we could see more of that for Bucky, at least hopefully. But yeah, I think it'll just be good for the offense in general. Baker specifically had complaints kind of at the season's end that the offense wasn't taking enough chances. They weren't pushing the ball downfield enough. And I think Zac Robinson, if he follows in the same footsteps of a lot of these Sean McVay disciples, is going to lean into that, establish the run early, piggyback off of that with the play action, take those shot plays. And I think that that's right up Baker's wheelhouse. So I think it'll be good for everybody involved.
Absolutely.
Cool.
And then I believe this is the last one, assuming we don't get any breaking news here on the pod. But Bobby Slowik stays with Miami. He's just promoted as the offensive coordinator. I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are first, because this is a little bit uninspiring to me.
Yeah, it's one of those where we were hoping it would be, someone a little bit more inventive and someone a little bit more aspiring, especially if you're a Devon Achane, owner. And what this kind of did, it was a little bit of a downgrade. I'm not gonna lie, because when it came to Mike McDaniel and the way he was able to employ, the players around the field as creatively as he did, it really I feel like it got Devon Achane involved a lot more than he naturally would in a lot of football games. Now, under a Bobby Slowik, I think that's definitely going to put a cap on his, not availability, but a cap on how much they use him in this offense and that creativity that they use him with. Yeah, that volume itself.
Yeah, I think time will tell with Bobby Slowik, and if this ends up being it's an internal hire, right? But if it ends up being a good internal hire, I think namely it's exactly what Will said. We'll have to see if he kind of goes to his training and roots and relies on the passing game more, or if he shows up and ends up acting as somewhat of like a Mike McDaniel disciple, where he's pulling lessons that he learned from Mike McDaniel there and being creative with the likes of Devon Achane and similar, who he probably should be using a lot, especially given the state of the Dolphins offense right now. And we don't know who their play call is. It confirmed Tua again? Is there a lot of uncertainty there?
I think that's a big question mark, and I think that's it's part of why it's tough to say what this is going to look like, is because if it's a Tua-led offense versus who's the Texas guy? I'm already forgetting.
Quinn Ewers.
Yeah, Quinn Ewers, or if they bring in somebody else. Jeff Hafley has ties to I'm forgetting everybody's name. Packers backup quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Malik Willis. Thank you
for
saving me. Yeah.
These are interesting points. I think, the Dolphins could have gone one of two directions, both of which we've referenced in the pod. They could have gone, this is kind of like they're going the way of the Commanders, right? Like they're saying, hey, we're an Oracle. We have to start figuring stuff out. We're going to really evaluate their internal talent and quality of our coordinators. Or they could have gone the route of bringing in like the likes of a Stefanski and saying, like, we're capable of shooting our shot. Like we'll bring someone who will bring stability and who's a known player to the org. This one, I don't know how it will shape out. And I think I'm curious to see if the Dolphins offense just deviates from what it's looked like the last couple of years or not.
So I personally don't have many takes on this. I was kind of confused by this hire, but from what I've seen, the reporting analysts that I've seen on Twitter seem to think that this promotion was made for continuity purposes, to kind of keep the status quo offensively. Personally, I don't think that he can maintain what McDaniel was able to do from a play calling perspective, from a play sequencing perspective. I don't know that he's quite as good at that. But maybe, like what we talked about with Achane, this could be a good thing from a fantasy perspective if it's continuity, if we're going to continue to see the quick game and the dump offs to him. Maybe that's a good thing from a fantasy perspective for Achane. But I do expect just an overall downgrade for this offense in general, because he's not Mike McDaniel. Even though he's from the same tree, he seems to have kind of different motivations, especially that last season where he was the play caller in Houston. We were constantly seeing like run, pass play sequencing where they'd get 2 yards, 1 yard, and then third and long, seemingly every possession. And if we continue to see that, then this offense is going to struggle mightily with the personnel that they currently have there. So I'm not overall encouraged for what this means for the offense, but potentially, just based on what I'm hearing from outside sources, I don't have any personal takes on it. Maybe Achane is a little bit safer and more insulated in the role that he currently has.
Yeah, and it's also, like you said, it's difficult to have takes because it's difficult to predict what personnel will be there. All we can do is talk about Achane, and he's a high floor player. I think he'll remain to be regardless of what ends up happening there because of his talent and the usage that he will demand. But we can't have too many more takes about Waddle or two other people that might not be starting the season for them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're the same. We still have to figure out who the head coach is going to be. Oh, no, Jeff Hafley.
Jeff
Yeah,
Hafley.
Jeff Hafley. I'm stupid.
It doesn't matter offensively, really. He's not.
That's why I was like, he's a defensive head coach, so it's like, yeah, they're gonna just do, I guess just keep the status quo and see what he can do. If he can do at least 80% of what Mike McDaniel could, I feel like that's a win.
Yeah.
You know, but it's
We'll see. We'll see. Anything to add, just kind of on the carousel in general before we finish this thing up?
No, I know it's going long, but I do want to ping this question to you also on Twitter and the Raid. It said that Grant Udinski was trending. Looks like he just interviewed for the Bills head coaching position, unless I briefly read it wrong. I want to get your takes on that. I want to get your takes on. First of all, I think it's good. I think that they fired McDermott because their motivation was to go for an offensive-minded coach. Might not have been the best time to do that, given that I think the best head coaching candidates available were defensive-minded coaches, with the exception of Mike McDaniel. But Grant Udinski is one that kind of is offensive-minded and could, I think, elevate the offense. I want to hear your takes on just brief 30-second kind of how do you feel about Grant Udinski to the Bills if that's where he ends up? How does it make sense for the offense? And is it an upgrade or a downgrade from Sean McDermott, who they could have stuck with?
Upgrade. Udinski is my favorite candidate in the entire cycle. I know that he's unproven. I know that he's only 30 years old, but he comes from Kevin O'Connell. He comes from Liam Cohen. They've spoken very highly about him and what he's meant to their offenses. He's worked very closely with these, really innovative offensive minds. Based on what we've seen from those guys, if he were to get a job somewhere, I expect kind of like a league average run pass rate, boosted quarterback performance. He's shown the ability to improve quarterback play everywhere that he's gone, and a similar willingness, like we talked about with McDaniel, to kind of adapt to personnel and configure his scheme to make the most of whatever he has. And so if he gets to go play with or coach with Josh Allen, I'd be through the roof.
Yeah, I think personally that's the move I would like to see for the Bills. I honestly, and this is another stinky pick, but I wouldn't be surprised they look at a guy like Brian Daboll as well with bringing him back. Yeah. Just because Josh Allen did have some good years under him, and it seems as of late they've been looking for some safety blankets for that boy. So, that would be a pretty good one to bring back.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, I think they fired the wrong guy, which many people will share that sentiment. But, I guess they weren't happy with whatever the 6th straight AFC championships or whatever it was, and they wanted something else. And I think Udinski, or I think another offensive-minded coach, honestly could be exciting there. I mean, it's not like they don't have the talent at quarterback position. Anyone should be happy to go there and coach Josh Allen.
The issue is what we saw with that the interview process there at the end after firing McDermott, the owner and Brandon Beane. It's a toxic situation. You
throwing your first round wide receiver picks under the bus while they're still on your team like that.
Or talking that openly poorly about your coaching staff while trying to bring in a new head coach, like that seems like a bad idea.
Also, they were talking poorly about the coaching staff, but I mean, you have to think that Joe Brady is someone they're evaluating or considering for head coach.
That too.
Like he's on
your
coaching
please
staff.
No. I really hope they don't do that.
We'll see.
Like we need to put the ball in Josh Allen's hands, and Joe Brady's not going to do that. So
cool.
But yeah.
Well, I'll let you do the outro.
Yeah. All right. That'll be it for us. We appreciate you guys as always. If you did stick with us until the end, please do leave a like on the video if you enjoyed. If you learned anything from it, we would very much appreciate it. Hit that subscribe button so that you can stay up to date as we continue to address more of these kind of coaching vacancies and new coaching hires as they come through. Hit the notification bell as well. Leave a comment down below to let us know if you guys agree with our takes on these coaches, if you have any different opinions, or if you have any predictions for who's going to fill these upcoming vacancies. We would very much appreciate it. But yeah, I think that'll probably do it for us. And we'll catch you in the next video. Peace.
Peace out.